The Netherlands is one of the very few countries in the world that exists below sea level. Nearly 1/3 of its territory lies beneath it. And without its system of dikes and water engineering, much of the country would not exist as it does today. Looking at a map, what stands out is not its size, but its position. The Netherlands sits where major European rivers meet the North Sea, a landscape constantly exposed to tides, storms, and rising water. For centuries, the Dutch have not only built cities and ports, they have built the very ground they stand on. Windmills, long sea barriers stretching for kilometers, and massive storm surge gates are not merely symbols. They are conditions for survival. In this journey, we will move across the Netherlands from urban centers to low-lying plains and out to the North Sea to understand how a small nation learned to control water rather than be controlled by it. And perhaps by the end, we will see the Netherlands not only as the land of tulips and canals, but as one of the clearest examples of human adaptation to nature. This is the Netherlands, a country that once stood on the edge of being swallowed by the sea. The Netherlands covers roughly 41,500 square kilometers. Yet what defines the country is not its size, but its elevation. Around 26% of its land lies below sea level, and nearly 60% of its population lives in areas vulnerable to flooding. The country maintains thousands of kilometers of dikes and water control infrastructure. The Delta Works system, one of the largest hydraulic engineering projects in the world, was constructed after the catastrophic flood of 1953, when more than 9,800 people lost their lives. Roughly 1,000 kilometers of primary sea and river dikes protect low-lying plains, while hundreds of pumping stations operate continuously to regulate water levels. Beyond water management, the Netherlands ranks among Europe's most densely populated countries, with more than 500 people per square kilometer. This density turns land use planning into a precise balance between housing, agriculture, and infrastructure. What stands out is that the Netherlands does not merely defend against the sea. For centuries, the Dutch have reclaimed land through polders areas drained from lakes or coastal waters for agriculture and urban use. The country's geography is shaped by the confluence of three major rivers, the Rhine, Meuse, and Scheldt, before they reach the North Sea. This makes the Netherlands both a commercial gateway to Europe and a landscape constantly under pressure from water. In this journey, we will explore how a nation below sea level maintains stability, prosperity, and dense urban life, without detaching from its defining natural force, water. If the Netherlands is defined by water, Amsterdam is where that relationship becomes most visible. Here, The city was not built beside water, but shaped together with it. Amsterdam has around 900,000 residents, while the wider metropolitan area exceeds 2.4 million people. Despite this density, the city remains compact through its concentric canal layout. The central canal system was constructed in the 17th century during the Dutch Golden Age. The canals stretch over 100 kilometers, weaving water through residential districts. Roughly 1,500 bridges cross these waterways, making Amsterdam one of Europe's most bridge-dense cities. The name Amsterdam derives from Amsterdam, referring to a dam built on the Amstel River in the 13th century. That structure formed the city's earliest foundation. Unlike many European capitals that formed around palaces or fortresses, Amsterdam grew around trade and maritime commerce. In the 17th century, it became one of the leading financial and shipping centers of the Western world. The headquarters of the Dutch East India Company once operated here, managing trade networks extending from Asia to South America. Canal houses are narrow at the front, yet deep in structure. This design originated from historical taxation based on facade width. Red brick facades, tall windows, and stepped gables create a low and consistent skyline. The city expanded outward in rings, rather than upward in height. Bicycles dominate daily transport, with more than 800,000 bicycles recorded in the city. This directly influences street design and traffic patterns. Amsterdam is the constitutional capital and cultural hub, yet national government functions are based in The Hague. This separation creates a more distributed power structure than in many other countries. From above, concentric canal rings surround the historic core. This structure is not merely aesthetic. It aids water management and spatial organization. Amsterdam demonstrates how a city can exist in low-lying terrain without detaching from water. Rather than resisting it, the city integrates water as its backbone. At the heart of Amsterdam lies a space where the city's movement first took shape. Not in the canals, nor at the harbor, but at the very site of the original dam on the Amstel River. From that hydraulic foundation, a square emerged. And from that square, Amsterdam expanded into the city we know today. Dam Square stands at the site of a dam constructed around 1270, when residents built a wooden barrier to control the Amstel River. That structure enabled the first permanent settlement to emerge. The square today covers roughly 8,000 square meters, making it the largest public space in central Amsterdam. Surrounding the square are buildings that represent different historical layers of the city. Most prominent is the Royal Palace. Completed in 1655, originally constructed as the City Hall during the Dutch Golden Age. In the 17th century, Amsterdam became Europe's leading financial hub, and Dam Square functioned as a meeting point for merchants, banking activity, and trade routes. Adjacent to the square stands the Nieuwe Kerk, dating back to the 15th century. For centuries, it has hosted royal inaugurations. Dam Square was not designed as a rigidly symmetrical royal plaza. Instead, It opens in multiple directions, linking directly to surrounding commercial streets. The National Monument, standing about 22 meters tall, was erected in 1956 to commemorate World War II victims. Its presence adds a modern layer of memory to a space already centuries old. At the very site of a water-controlled dam, Amsterdam evolved into a global commercial center. What began as hydraulic infrastructure transformed into a political and symbolic core. Dam Square illustrates the link between geography and authority in the Netherlands. The dam protected land from water, and from that foundation, a city emerged and expanded outward into the world. From a square that once functioned as a water-control dam, Amsterdam did not remain confined to defense against the sea. The city soon turned its attention toward the open ocean. In the early 17th century, the Netherlands entered what is known as the Dutch Golden Age, a period of unprecedented economic and maritime expansion. After gaining independence from Spain in 1648, the Dutch Republic emerged as a major commercial power. Earlier, in 1602, the Dutch East India Company was founded. It became the first publicly traded joint stock company in history, laying the groundwork for the modern stock market. During the 17th century, Dutch merchant fleets are estimated to have accounted for nearly 1/2 of Europe's shipping vessels, enabling this small nation to control extensive global trade routes. Amsterdam became Europe's leading financial center, with its stock exchange established in 1611, one of the earliest in the world. Goods from Asia, Africa, and the Americas passed through Dutch ports. Spices, silk, tea, and precious metals flowed into Amsterdam before distribution across Europe. Economic prosperity extended beyond commerce. The period also saw remarkable advances in art and science. Painters such as Rembrandt and Vermeer depicted urban life and the emerging merchant class. Unlike many European empires of the time, the Dutch Republic did not centralize authority under an absolute monarch. Power was distributed among provinces, creating a more flexible commercial environment. Global expansion also brought competition and conflict. Naval wars with England and France in the 17th century reflected the Netherlands' new position on the world stage. Wealth accumulated during this period shaped Amsterdam's canal architecture and administrative buildings near Dam Square. The city expanded through its concentric canal plan over just a few decades. The Dutch Golden Age did not last indefinitely. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, rising international competition reduced Dutch dominance. Yet the financial and maritime foundations built during this era continue to shape the nation today. It was during this era that the Netherlands formed its identity as a maritime trading nation, modest in territory, yet globally connected. From 17th century wooden fleets, the narrative now turns toward another force that defines the Netherlands: geography and water. After expanding outward to the oceans in the 17th century, the story of the Netherlands returns to something closer, yet more decisive: the ground beneath their feet. The Netherlands sits at the confluence of three major rivers: the Rhine, Meuse, and Scheldt before they flow into the North Sea. This forms a vast delta where land and water continuously interweave. Approximately 26% of the country's land lies below sea level, and nearly 55% is at risk of flooding without protective infrastructure. Geography here is not a fixed foundation, but a system requiring constant maintenance. The lowest point in the Netherlands, Zuidplaspolder, sits around -6.7 meters below sea level. This land exists only because pumping systems operate continuously. The Dutch coastline stretches roughly 451 kilometers, directly facing the North Sea, an area frequently exposed to storms and powerful tides. Over centuries, the Dutch developed the polder system land enclosed by dikes and drained to create farmland or residential zones. Polders are not naturally dry terrain. They were once lakes, marshes, or even shallow coastal waters before reclamation. The Netherlands is largely flat, with an average elevation of roughly 1 meter above sea level. Such minimal variation makes water control a central national concern. Unlike countries defined by mountains or plateaus, the Netherlands relies on dikes and storm barriers to form its physical boundary against the sea. Climate change and rising sea levels add new pressure. Projections indicate significant sea level rise during the 21st century, requiring continuous upgrades to protective systems. Yet Dutch geography is not solely a challenge. The fertile delta supports intensive agriculture, especially flower and vegetable production for export. Cities such as Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague are built on low ground, reinforced with wooden piles and deep foundations. The Netherlands exists in a delicate balance between water and land. Neither element fully dominates the other. This unique geography has shaped how the country functions, from urban planning and transport infrastructure to environmental policy. In the sections ahead, we will examine how the Dutch translate geographic theory into engineering reality through windmills, dikes, and massive storm surge barriers. From the vast delta and low-lying landscapes dependent on dikes, the map narrows as we move inland. Near the geographic center of the country, a city emerged not from a seaport, but from the convergence of rivers and land routes. Here, the flat terrain remains, yet the urban rhythm shifts less directly exposed to the sea and shaped more by transit than by defense. Utrecht sits close to the geographic center of the Netherlands, where historic land and river routes once intersected. Today, it is home to around 360,000 people, and although it is not the capital, it functions as the country's primary transit hub. The story of Utrecht begins in the Roman era, around the middle of the 1st century. A military fort was established along the ancient Rhine to guard the empire's northern frontier. Over the centuries, the city evolved into the most important religious center in what would later become the Netherlands. The Dam Tower, completed in the 14th century, rises to about 112 meters and remains the tallest church tower in the country. Seen from a distance, the Dam Tower is more than an architectural landmark. It acts as a visual anchor for the historic center, with major streets seeming to radiate outward from its base. Utrecht's canal system differs from that of Amsterdam. Rather than concentric rings, it features distinctive two-level wharves. Waterfront cellars once served as storage and loading spaces during the medieval trading period. This structure reflects Utrecht's inland character. The city did not depend on a seaport, but on river routes and overland connections. That central position remains significant today. Utrecht Central handles more than 100,000 passengers each day, making it the busiest railway station in the Netherlands. The terrain in Utrecht mirrors much of the Netherlands flat, with only slight elevation above sea level. Its inland location, however, shields it from direct exposure to North Sea storms that affect cities such as Rotterdam or The Hague. The architecture is predominantly low-rise red brick, forming a stable skyline largely untouched by skyscrapers. The city retains a manageable scale, easy to navigate and walk through. Utrecht reveals another dimension of the Netherlands, a country not defined solely by the sea, but tightly connected through its inland network. As the inland-urban network fades, the land gradually drops in elevation. In an area where water constantly seeks to return, a mechanical system was built to keep the ground dry. KINDERDIJK is located in South Holland, at the meeting point of the Lek and Noord rivers. It sits in one of the lowest areas of the delta, where water constantly pushes inland. The site contains 19 windmills, constructed in the mid-18th century. These structures were not built for grinding grain, but for pumping water out of polders to keep land dry. The windmills at KINDERDIJK were completed around 1740, at a time when flood control systems required reinforcement following severe flooding events. Water levels in the polders can sit roughly 2 meters below the surrounding rivers, making continuous drainage essential. Each windmill functioned as a mechanical pumping station. Wind rotated the blades, transferring motion down a vertical shaft to drive a scoop wheel or screw pump that lifted water to a higher canal. The system operated in stages. Water was lifted from low-lying land to intermediate canals, then discharged into major rivers. Viewed from above, the windmills align along canals in a symmetrical pattern. This landscape is not merely symbolic. It reflects precise engineering design. KINDERDIJK was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1997, recognizing its historical and engineering significance. Before steam engines and electric pumps, windmills were the only means of keeping land dry. Entire communities depended on wind direction for survival. On windless days, water levels could rise quickly. For that reason, the system was built with multiple layers of redundancy. KINDERDIJK demonstrates that water control in the Netherlands is not a temporary project. It is a continuous structure sustained across centuries. Today, the windmills remain intact. Although modern pumping stations have replaced their function, they stand as evidence of the early phase of Dutch hydraulic engineering. If Dutch geography posed a challenge, KINDERDIJK reveals the first human response. Not relocation, but persistence, staying, and learning how to hold the land. From the windmills of KINDERDIJK that keep the land dry, the journey follows the water toward the sea. Where the Rhine and Meuse widen before meeting the North Sea, another city rises built not on tradition alone, but on global trade in motion. Rotterdam is the second largest city in the Netherlands, with roughly 650,000 residents. Yet its economic influence extends far beyond its population size. The city sits at the gateway of the Rhine-Meuse-Scheldt Delta, where inland river routes connect directly to the North Sea. This location has made Rotterdam one of the world's most significant ports. The Port of Rotterdam stretches approximately 42 kilometers from the city center to the open sea. It is the largest seaport in Europe and remained the world's busiest port for several decades during the 20th century. Each year, the port handles over 400 million tons of cargo, including containers, crude oil, liquefied gas, and industrial materials. Unlike Amsterdam's historic canal layout, Rotterdam presents a modern and direct urban character. This identity stems from a major event during the Second World War. In May 1940, much of the city center was destroyed by bombing. More than 14,000 buildings were flattened, forcing Rotterdam to rebuild almost entirely from scratch. Post-war reconstruction did not aim to restore the past. Instead, it embraced a new vision: wide boulevards, glass towers, and bold contemporary design replaced older structures. The Erasmus Bridge, completed in the late 20th century, became a modern symbol of the city. Its cable-stayed structure creates a slender line across the Maas River. Rotterdam is not only a seaport, but also a key European logistics and energy hub. Automated container terminals and high-tech storage facilities reflect deep mechanization. Viewed from above, a clear contrast appears between industrial zones, docks, and residential districts. The city exhibits more functional separation than Amsterdam. Yet water remains central. The Maas River runs through Rotterdam, linking inland Europe to the ocean. Rotterdam represents another phase in the Dutch story, where water is no longer solely a challenge to manage, but an economic force driving growth. If KINDERDIJK reveals traditional defense against water, Rotterdam illustrates the shift toward utilizing and operating water on a global scale. From here, the journey moves toward the political center of the country, where decisions about water, trade, and planning are shaped at a national level. After the industrial scale of Rotterdam's port, the journey shifts to another center, one where power is measured not in containers or cargo ships, but in law and national decisions. The Hague, known locally as Den Haag, is home to around 550,000 residents, yet its influence extends far beyond its size. It hosts the Dutch government, parliament, and most central administrative institutions. Unlike many countries where the capital also serves as the political center, the Netherlands separates these roles. Amsterdam is the constitutional capital, while The Hague functions as the seat of government. This division reflects the historical structure of the early Dutch Republic. The Binnenhof complex dates back to the 13th century and has functioned continuously for over 700 years as an administrative and political center. The Hague hosts more than 150 international organizations, including the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. This makes it one of the world's foremost centers of international law. Geographically, The Hague lies about 6 kilometers from the North Sea coast, linking political authority directly to the shoreline. This proximity carries not only scenic value, but also strategic importance in coastal management and security. The city presents a different character compared to Rotterdam or Amsterdam. Its architecture reflects administrative and diplomatic functions. With numerous embassies, international headquarters, and expansive parks. The central district avoids dense clusters of skyscrapers. Government buildings maintain moderate height, projecting authority without overwhelming the urban fabric. Major projects such as the Delta Works and coastal defense upgrades originate from deliberations in The Hague. This illustrates the direct link between politics and geography in the Netherlands. From above, the city appears as a blend of administrative quarters, residential areas, and nearby coastline. Open spaces and the Hofvijver Lake give the center a calmer rhythm compared to commercial cities. The Hague represents the second structural layer of the Netherlands. If Rotterdam is the economic gateway, The Hague shapes the legal framework governing that system. Here, water may not appear as visible canals or crashing waves, yet every major water policy is shaped within these institutions. In the Netherlands, water management is not only technical, it is political. Modern life in the Netherlands runs smoothly because of infrastructure, planning, and the political decisions behind them. But long before electric transport, highways, and container ports, energy came from something far simpler: wind. And along the banks of the Zaan River, wind once powered an entire large-scale production system. That place is not merely a preserved heritage village. It was once a functioning industrial center of the 17th century. SCHANS lies about 15 kilometers north of Amsterdam, along the Zaan River. The area recreates the atmosphere of a 17th and 18th century industrial village, defined by windmills and distinctive green wooden houses. In the 17th century, the Zaan region became one of the earliest industrial zones in the world. At its peak, more than 600 windmills operated here, supporting a wide range of industries. These windmills were not limited to grain milling. They powered sawmills, oil presses, spice grinding, and even paint production. Today, ZAANSE preserves around 10 historic windmills, each representing a different industrial function from the past. The wooden houses date back to the 17th and 18th centuries, featuring narrow facades and sloped roofs. Many were relocated from nearby areas to preserve them within this concentrated heritage setting. The Zaanse River played a central role in industrial growth. It provided transport routes and created open wind corridors essential for mill operation. The mill network contributed to Dutch dominance in shipbuilding materials during the Golden Age. Viewed from above, windmills line the riverbank, their blades turning slowly against flat skies and low meadows. ZAANSE receives approximately 2 million visitors each year, making it one of the most visited sites outside Amsterdam. Yet the site is not merely a tourist attraction. It stands as evidence of early mechanization, when wind served as a primary energy source for large-scale production. Unlike KINDERDIJK, where windmills controlled water, ZAANSE reveals the economic dimension of wind-powered technology. The former presence of over 600 windmills illustrates the specialization and industrial scale the region once achieved. In a modern context, ZAANSE contrasts with Rotterdam. If the port represents global industrial scale, this village recalls an earlier phase powered by natural energy. From the windmills along the Zaanse River, the journey moves north toward broader waters. Here, instead of wind-powered industry, the story centers on fishing and lakeside life. Volendam is a small fishing village in North Holland, situated along the shore of the IJsselmeer, about 20 kilometers from Amsterdam. Its proximity to the capital allows it to preserve tradition while remaining closely connected to international tourism. Volendam has a population of roughly 22,000 residents, forming a relatively small yet stable community across generations. Before the IJsselmeer was formed by the AFSLUITDIJK project in 1932, this area was part of the open Zuiderzee. Sea fishing once served as the primary livelihood for local residents. When the sea was sealed off and transformed into a freshwater lake, traditional fishing declined significantly. The community gradually shifted toward tourism and small-scale commerce. Along the harbor stand low wooden houses with narrow facades and red-tiled roofs, reflecting the coastal architectural style of North Holland. The harbor maintains small-scale fishing activity, though many boats now cater primarily to visitors. Each year, Volendam welcomes approximately 2.5 million visitors, making it one of the country's most visited waterfront villages. Traditional culture remains visible through local folk costumes and music. The distinctive white caps once symbolized the fishing community. The expansive IJsselmeer creates an open horizon, where calm water reflects the wide Dutch sky. Unlike industrial Rotterdam or canal-lined Amsterdam, Volendam moves at a slower pace, centered around community life and the harbor. From this small harbor, the journey continues to another waterside community, where land connects to land across long dikes stretching over the lake. Volendam reflects a community that adapted once the sea turned into fresh water. Yet not every settlement along the former Zuiderzee was connected to the mainland from the beginning. One remained fully separated for centuries, exposed to wind and tides, until a dike linked it back to the mainland in the mid-20th century. That place is Marken, a former island carrying the memory of isolation. Marken is a small village in North Holland, located about 25 kilometers northeast of Amsterdam. For centuries, it existed as an isolated island in the former Zuiderzee. It was not until 1957 that a dike connected Marken to the mainland, ending centuries of isolation. Today, Marken has a population of roughly 1,800 residents, making it one of the smallest communities around the IJsselmeer. Marken represents another layer in the Dutch narrative, where adaptation occurs not only at national scale through projects like AFSLUITDIJK, but also within small local communities. If Rotterdam illustrates expansion toward the sea, Marken reflects how communities once withdrew and fortified themselves to survive it. From the small island that once endured sea storms, the journey moves toward the structure that reshaped the Dutch coastline entirely. Here, the boundary between sea and land is no longer defined by nature alone. The AFSLUITDIJK is a sea dike connecting North Holland to Friesland, stretching approximately 32 kilometers across what was once the open Zuiderzee. The structure was completed in 1932, marking a turning point in Dutch water management history. Before the dike was built, the Zuiderzee was a vast inlet of the North Sea, regularly causing severe flooding in coastal settlements. When the AFSLUITDIJK sealed off the inlet, it transformed saltwater sea into the freshwater IJsselmeer. The transition occurred gradually, as river inflow diluted salinity over several years. The dike has an average width of about 90 meters, wide enough to accommodate a highway and complex water control systems. At both ends of the dike, sluices and discharge gates regulate water levels in the lake, while protecting inland areas from North Sea tides. Prior to construction, the flood of 1916 caused severe damage and strengthened political resolve. Thousands of hectares were inundated, turning the closure plan into a national priority. The AFSLUITDIJK was more than a barrier. It enabled large-scale land reclamation projects, creating new polders for agriculture and settlement. The project laid the foundation for later water control systems, including the Delta Works. Standing on the dike, one can observe a clear contrast. Calm freshwater on one side, and the North Sea with stronger waves and salt content on the other. The dike rises roughly 7 meters above mean sea level, designed to withstand storm surges for decades. The structure demonstrates the depth of human intervention in natural geography. The Netherlands did not merely defend its coastline, it redrew it. If Marken represents adaptation to the sea, the AFSLUITDIJK embodies deliberate transformation of territory. Once the coastline had been redrawn and salt water turned freshwater, the inland landscape began to evolve as well. In a low-lying area of overages, water was not held back by massive sea barriers, but allowed to weave between homes and meadows. GIETHOORN is located in the province of Overijssel, about 120 kilometers northeast of Amsterdam. Unlike coastal villages shaped by maritime trade, this settlement grew from peat extraction and low inland terrain. The village has around 2,800 residents, and that modest scale has remained relatively stable over decades. This continuity preserves much of its original structure. During the Middle Ages, peat extraction for fuel left behind deep excavations. Once abandoned, these pits filled with water, forming a network of small lakes and natural canals. Today, roughly 7 kilometers of canals run through the village center, effectively replacing conventional road networks. More than 170 wooden bridges connect clusters of homes. From above, they appear as delicate arcs crossing dark water surfaces. Houses in GIETHOORN commonly feature thick thatched roofs, capable of lasting decades with proper maintenance. Low walls and open gardens extend directly to the water's edge, with minimal fencing. There is no central boulevard, no expansive square, no busy intersections. Instead, narrow waterways guide boats gently through subtle bends. Standing here, there is a distinct impression. GIETHOORN does not attempt to become a symbol. It does not perform. It does not seek validation. And perhaps that absence of performance is what makes it more enduring than places designed for instant impact. The traditional punter boat was once propelled by wooden poles. Today, many operate with electric motors, preserving the calm surface and reducing noise pollution. GIETHOORN is part of the Weerribbenweiden National Park, one of the largest freshwater marshlands in Western Europe. The ecosystem sustains rich biodiversity, including waterfowl and aquatic vegetation. Unlike Rotterdam, where water fuels industry, or the AFSLUITDIJK, where it is restrained by concrete, in GIETHOORN water is integrated directly into daily structure. In winter, when canals freeze, they transform into natural skating paths. In summer, small boats glide past gardens blooming at the water's edge. GIETHOORN reveals another version of the Netherlands, where water management does not appear as monumental engineering, but as subtle balance between housing and environment. The quiet atmosphere here is not the absence of activity, but the result of movement unfolding slowly and at human scale. If the AFSLUITDIJK represents a decision to reshape national geography, GIETHOORN represents the ability to live within that geography without overpowering it. GIETHOORN reveals coexistence with water on a small scale. Yet in the southern Netherlands, water has not always been gentle. Storms from the North Sea once forced the country to make a decision that would define its survival. The Delta Works is a system of dams, sluices, and storm surge barriers, constructed after the catastrophic flood of 1953. when more than 1,800 people lost their lives and tens of thousands of homes were destroyed. The disaster submerged over 150,000 hectares of land, compelling the Netherlands to completely redesign its southern coastal defenses. The Delta Works is not a single structure, but a collection of massive constructions spanning major river mouths such as the Rhine, Meuse, and Scheldt. One of its most remarkable components is the Oosterschelde barrier, stretching about 9 kilometers, with enormous steel gates that close during storm surges. These gates are closed only when necessary, allowing marine ecosystems to remain active under normal conditions. The primary dams and barriers of the Delta Works extend for over 30 kilometers, excluding additional coastal reinforcements and secondary systems. The project was completed in phases over several decades and has been recognized as one of the 7 wonders of the modern world by the American Society of Civil Engineers. The system was engineered to reduce flood risk to a probability of once in 10,000 years in densely populated areas. Unlike the AFSLUITDIJK, which sealed off the sea entirely, the Delta Works balances protection with the preservation of natural tidal movement. From above, the immense barriers appear as concrete lines slicing across wide estuaries. The project protects low-lying southern regions while reinforcing national confidence in managing water. The Delta Works represents the pinnacle of Dutch engineering, where geography is no longer an unchangeable fate, but a variable that can be calculated and managed. If KINDERDIJK marked the mechanical beginning, and the AFSLUITDIJK reshaped the coastline, the Delta Works completes a modern defensive system against the North Sea. The Delta Works demonstrate how steel and concrete can restrain the sea. Yet not every stretch of Dutch coastline is sealed behind barriers. In the north, there is a region where tides continue to rise and fall freely each day, and nature moves on its own rhythm. The Wadden Sea is a shallow coastal sea stretching along the shores of the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark. Covering roughly 1,000 square kilometers, it is the largest unbroken intertidal system in the world. The Dutch portion accounts for about 2,500 square kilometers, encompassing mudflats, sandbanks, and barrier islands. Twice a day, the tide recedes and exposes vast mudflats. This constant cycle creates one of Europe's most dynamic ecosystems. The Wadden Sea was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2009, recognizing its ecological value and integrity. The region serves as a critical stopover for more than 10 million migratory birds each year, including species traveling between the Arctic and Africa. When the tide withdraws, nutrient-rich mudflats emerge, filled with worms, shellfish, and small organisms that sustain birds and fish. The structure of the Wadden Sea is not static. Sandbanks and mudflats constantly shift under the influence of waves and currents. Unlike the Delta Works, where boundaries are fixed by concrete, here they are in constant motion. The area also acts as a natural buffer, absorbing wave energy before it reaches inland dikes. Barrier islands such as Texel, Vlieland, and Terschelling form a natural shield between the North Sea and the mainland. The Wadden Sea represents another balance in the Dutch story. Not a place where water is blocked, nor where it is industrially exploited, but where it is respected as a living ecosystem. After dams and storm barriers, the Wadden Sea reminds us that not every challenge requires engineering. Sometimes, the solution lies in leaving space for nature. In this tidal zone, water is neither adversary nor tool, but shared habitat for millions of organisms. As the tide withdraws from the Wadden Sea and nutrient-rich mudflats are revealed, the exposed ground fills with subtle movement. Across the tidal flats, a bird with a distinctive bill begins to forage in its own deliberate way. The Eurasian spoonbill is a large wading bird, measuring roughly 80 to 93 centimeters in body length, with a wingspan reaching up to 135 centimeters. Its white plumage contrasts sharply against dark tidal mudflats. Its most distinctive feature is the long, flattened bill that widens into a spoon-like tip. This structure defines its entire feeding strategy. When the tide recedes, spoonbills wade through shallow water, sweeping their heads in a semicircular motion. With bills slightly open beneath the surface, they detect prey by touch rather than sight. Their diet consists mainly of small fish, shrimp, insect larvae, and other invertebrates hidden within mud. The Wadden Sea is one of the most important breeding grounds for spoonbills in Western Europe. In spring, they return from wintering areas in Africa or Southern Europe. The breeding season typically begins in April. Spoonbills nest on sandy islands or marshy areas with minimal disturbance from predators. A single nest usually contains 3 to 5 eggs, with both parents taking turns incubating them for about 3 weeks. Once hatched, chicks rely entirely on their parents. Both adults forage and return to regurgitate food for their young. By late summer, fledglings begin practicing flight in preparation for their first migration. Their annual return in spring signals that the natural cycles of the Wadden Sea remain intact. As the tide rises and mudflats disappear, spoonbills leave feeding grounds and gather on higher sandbanks to rest. They move in rhythm with the tides, fully adapted to the twice-daily rise and fall. The presence of spoonbills here shows that even in a country defined by water control, there remain spaces where nature leads. Along the surface of the Wadden Sea, the tides shift quietly each day. But further out in the North Sea, movement becomes more forceful and from above. A seabird plunges toward the water at remarkable speed. The northern gannet is one of the largest seabirds in the North Atlantic. Adults measure roughly 87 to 100 centimeters in body length, with a wingspan reaching up to 2 meters. Its white plumage with a pale yellow head contrasts against black wingtips, making it highly visible against the gray skies of the North Sea. Northern gannets are known for plunge diving, They can reach speeds of up to 200 kilometers per hour when striking the water. Their skull and neck are specially adapted to absorb impact when hitting the water. Nostrils close during dives to prevent water entry. Their primary diet consists of herring, mackerel, and other schooling fish. They often hunt cooperatively, spotting fish from above before diving simultaneously. After the initial plunge, they can dive to depths of around 20 meters in pursuit of prey. The breeding season begins in spring. They gather in large colonies on cliffs or offshore islands, with some colonies exceeding 60,000 breeding pairs. Each pair typically lays a single egg per season. Both parents take turns incubating for about 6 weeks. Chicks are fed regurgitated fish from the adults. The rearing period lasts roughly 3 months before fledging. Northern gannets can live for more than 30 years in the wild, and they frequently return to the same colony to breed. Their presence off the Dutch northern coast demonstrates that while humans manage much of the shoreline, the open sea maintains its own natural momentum. The Netherlands may be small in size, yet the way it confronts its geography carries remarkable scale. From northern tidal flats to southern storm barriers, every structure reflects a clear decision: not to escape natural conditions, but to live alongside them. We hope this journey has offered you a deeper perspective on a country that has often stood at the edge of the sea, yet never abandoned its land. If you found this story meaningful, consider leaving a like and subscribing so you won't miss future journeys. Your support allows us to continue telling stories about places shaped by unique conditions like this one. And perhaps one day, the dikes, mudflats, and waterside villages you've just seen will no longer remain distant images, but places you experience in person. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this journey.